afterwards. I now leave the floor to Suyash.
Thank you, Priya. Thank you for the nice introduction, and thank you for having me here. It's always good to be part of these webinars where we actually share whatever we know and try to create this kind of hopefully bigger ecosystem, blockchain and crypto ecosystem in Mauritius, and hopefully this can be pushed to other countries as well. So let me just share my screen to start with. So I hope you can see my screen. I think that should be the case. Okay, so today we'll be talking about NFTs. I'm sure that a lot of people here, like attending this webinar, have been hearing about NFTs a lot, and especially from the price perspective, because we have been hearing a lot of things about NFTs, especially the huge amount of money that it's generating for artists and for different kinds of NFT platforms. The aim of today's webinar is really to kind of debunk some of the myths surrounding NFTs, but also try to show you that when we talk about blockchains and cryptocurrencies, it's not always about money. It's much more than that. It's also about what we can kind of disrupt in the market, and NFTs are here to disrupt a lot of markets. It's not only about art, it's not only about a specific thing in the industry, but the use case which affects NFTs can actually be applied in a lot of different sectors, in a lot of different industries. So let's start. So I will try to go not in more like a lot of technical details on NFTs, but we'll definitely touch some of the technical details so that we kind of have a general knowledge of all the different aspects related to NFTs. So to start with, let me share a first interesting note about NFTs. So on Loot NFT is a project that I have been involved in for the last 3 months, and it's actually a very new project. The Loot NFT project is a platform which allows Mauritian artists, as well as other artists from all around the world, to actually come on the platform, display their products, that is their work that they have done, okay, artists, and actually have people from all around the world to actually bid and try to buy these work. And just to give you an example of how this is so groundbreaking, one of our artists actually sold one of his work, which is called the O1, for 94,000, a bit more than 94,000 buns. So buns is a kind of a crypto token that is used in this platform. So just to give you an idea, and that amounts to around more than 5,000 USD worth for the artist. So that's very interesting when we talk about NFTs, because we'll go into that a bit in the next few slides, but it kinds of create a new market, a new way of doing things. And this is what blockchain and cryptocurrencies are all about. It's about disrupting the existing system, disrupting the existing the current way that we are doing things. And it's not only about business, but it's also about art, and that's one of the use cases where we can actually see blockchain being used not only in cryptocurrencies, that is not only in the financial sector, but also in other sectors like art and many other aspects. So let's see what is tokenization, because when we talk about NFTs, we are referring to the concept of tokenization. So what's tokenization? So basically, when you think about it, tokenization is really um, the activity of representing an object. It could be anything. It could be a digital asset. It could be a physical asset, by a representation. Representing such an asset by an abstract or digital token. Okay, so that's kind of a very abstract explanation. We'll go into more details later on, but the aim of tokenization is really to have a physical or a digital object and actually represent that object by something else. And it could be anything. It could be a certificate. It could be a digital token in the context of a blockchain. It could be a paper certificate, like how we have been doing a lot of things till now. For example, you could argue that your house, which is represented by a contract, okay, and the contract being a tokenization of that asset, because it represents that asset, and you can actually sell your house by transferring that certificate or that piece of paper. So the concept of tokenization is not something new. When you think about it, it has been here for so long. What is new really is how blockchain is kind of changing the way it is done, and how it is kind of democratizing how tokenization works. And another like very useful example is when we think about money. So when you go further in the way money works, money can be considered as an example of tokenization, because what you are tokenizing when you're using money is really value. So you have value for something and you tokenize that value by real money. So tokenization has been here for quite some time, and blockchain is kind of changing how it actually works. So I mentioned how in the past we were using paper-based tokenization techniques, like certificates and things like that. Then the next iteration was how we can actually use digital systems for that. And the digital systems were not very different from the first phase, where we're using paper-based or physical items-based tokenization techniques, because even digitizing the tokenization process meant that you needed to have a central entity in the sense that you could tokenize something, but you needed someone or some entity or some institution to say that, okay, this token represents that piece of asset. And this applies for anything. If you have your house, you have the document, but there's an institution at the end, a government-based institution in most of the cases, which can actually say, okay, we have this repository which also states that you are the owner of this asset, of this house. And this applies for many other things as well. So you have like pieces of art which have the same system, where you have a single repository which stores a representation of that piece of art, but also the owner of that piece of art. So basically, the repository is very simple. It's created and maintained by a central entity, and that's how it has been working till now. And you can argue that it has been working correctly, but not without a lot of problems. And some of the problems include, number one, that it was very centralized in nature. Basically, this system created kind of this exclusive group where you needed to be part of something or part of a certain category, group of people, to be able to be part of this repository. For example, in some cases, it doesn't apply. Like, for example, if you have a house or something like that, then you're automatically in that repository. But in other cases, like let's say you are an artist, and this is what's going to become relevant in our next slides. If you're an artist, then there are different categories of artists. You have the well-known ones, you have the less well-known ones, and you have the upcoming and maybe the young artists. So so you have these kinds of differentiation between all these different, let's say, classes of artists, or of these kind of creators. What I term them as creators because they could create different things. It could be a tableau, it could be a sculpture, it could be anything, but it is related to art. So you have this categorization, and this kind of creates an exclusivity system, where you need to attain a certain level of let's say popularity to be able to be part of this group. And sometimes it's not fair, but the current system doesn't allow it to be fair, because from the ground up it's an exclusivity based system. So that's one of the issues. Now, second thing is that the fact that it's kind of an exclusive group and you have this central entity, it creates kind of a monopolistic structure where which leads to very high fees which are charged by these I would say central entities. You could have cases where artists take only 5% or 10% of their work because it costs so much to be part of this kind of privileged group of artists or of the curators. So this problem is not specific to art or NFTs. This is a problem which applies across a lot of the industries that blockchain is trying to disrupt. We're talking about money, central banks, commercial banks, and a lot of other things as well. So and this is where blockchain comes into play, because now what's happening is that previously you had a system where you had the artist, you had the work, what the artist is trying to sell or transact, and you had the central entity. It could be curators, it could be museums, it could be any institution in the middle, and then you had general people who would actually try to buy these pieces of these creations. And the intermediary in between could be several layers. So what happens now is that these different layers have a very specific role. They have a role of kind of a trusted party. The reason they are important, they have been important for so long, is that they can ensure the authenticity of any kind of creation, because they have that valuable repository where they keep a representation of any kind of creation, plus all the details. And it's very important to be sure that whatever you're buying is authentic, hasn't been sold to two different people, and because this is all about exclusivity. And so these intermediaries had a very important role of acting as a trusted party. Now, with the advent of blockchain, this is changing. This is changing in the sense that these layers of intermediaries are being replaced by blockchain-based system, because when you think about blockchain-based systems, they are systems of trust, meaning that you can actually trust blockchains to do the right thing because they have a set of rules which cannot be compromised. Compromised easily. So you have these set of rules which apply to everyone. Okay, and using the blockchain technology to replace these set of intermediaries become very, very appealing, because now you have this fair system that you can set up, and you have this trusted system because you can actually check all the rules, and the trust in the base blockchain is actually propagated to other things as well, because when you do a transfer now, you don't need any intermediary to ensure that the transfer has been done, or you don't need any intermediary to ensure the authenticity of creations, because the blockchain technology propagates the trust to all these different components, to all these different kind of derivative actions based on the blockchain technology. So this is kind of a kind of an abstract explanation of tokenization and NFTs and how they come together and what problems they are trying to solve in the current environment. So now let's go into exactly what are NFTs. So when you think about the term NFT, it stands for non-fungible tokens. Now, non-fungible tokens doesn't tell you a lot about what are NFTs. It actually makes it even more confusing. Now, what is fungible? What does fungibility means? So a quick explanation of that is as follows. So imagine you have a 100 rupee note. A 100 rupee note can be exchanged for any 100 rupee note and still maintain the same importance, the same value, and the same purchasing power. It doesn't matter if you have a 100 rupee note or another 100 rupee note. And this is called fungibility. And this applies also to cryptocurrencies. For example, you have one Bitcoin and someone else has another Bitcoin. If you exchange the Bitcoin, that's going to have the same value, even if it's a kind of a different Bitcoin, but it's still the same value. So fungibility means that instances of the same class of objects have the same properties. They are indistinguishable from other items. Now, yes, for example, for a rupee, for 100 rupee note, you could have the number in the note. So these are numbers which kind of uniquely identify a 100 rupee note, but they are irrelevant in the way they are used. Now, this is called fungibility. Now, non-fungibility is obviously the opposite of that, meaning that an object can actually have a property which makes it unique, and you need to represent that uniqueness in whatever you try to do. And NFTs is all about that. For example, if you have a house and you want to represent that in an NFT, you can do so, because another person may have his or her own house, but that's not the same house, because each house is unique. And this is what non-fungible means. It means that within the same class of objects, each object is unique. And this is how non-fungible tokens come into play, meaning that now you have these non-fungible assets and you represent that asset by a token, hence the word NFT, hence the term NFT. So so we talk about fungibility, we talk about uniqueness, and a very important aspect of NFTs is how you kind of separate the asset and the ownership of the asset. And now, and again, this has been done for quite some time. For example, if you're selling a house, you're not taking a house and transfer it to someone else, like physically doing any transfer. What you're going to transfer is the ownership, and the ownership is represented by a piece of paper or a contract or anything like that. So and the same thing is being applied based on the blockchain technology. But the interesting thing is that The blockchain technology allows for much better interoperability, plus better kind of, I would say, transactional ease, in the sense that it's much easier now to do any transfer of NFTs, which is in many cases very quick, costs very little to do these kinds of transfers. So it's kind of pushing NFTs ownership to the next level, and the separation of ownership and the asset itself is very important, because you could actually buy the ownership of an asset. It could be a piece of art, it could be a sculpture, it could be a house, it could be your car, but you don't actually have a direct contact with the physical asset, but you still hold the ownership. And in most cases, in the past, this ownership would be kind of guaranteed by a central entity, by an institution, or even by a private company. But in the case of blockchain, the ownership is guaranteed by the blockchain. If you want to go into more details, this will be ensured by the fact that you hold the keys or the private keys to that specific NFT. So now let's go into more details about how do NFTs actually work. So there are different components, there are different steps to understand how do NFTs work. So firstly, when we talk about NFTs, you need to have something to represent. It could be a physical or a digital asset. A physical example, of course, would be a house, a car, a unique item, maybe that you have kept, something quite unique, collectible. So things like that, which represent something unique. For example, you could have a table, but which was owned by someone very popular, or like with a historical background. So it could be a table, but it's something really unique. So you need to have these assets. Now, in the current context, you could have a digital asset, you could have a digital picture of something, you could have video clips, you could have audio, you could have songs, which can be represented by NFTs. You could have the rights to a song, which can be represented by NFTs. You could have a car, which is represented by an NFT. And in the future, these NFTs can be used to actually use the asset. Imagine a case in the future where you buy a car is represented by an NFT, and the car will only start when you provide a signature representing that NFT, meaning that this signature can only be given by the owner of the NFT. So when you buy the car, you actually buy the NFT, you take the car, and the car will only start if you provide a digital signature showing that you are the owner of that NFT. So these are real world use cases where actually NFTs can be used in the real world. And this applies also for houses. Like you could have a house and the door is locked, and it can be unlocked only if you have an NFT for that house. So these are the things that will come into play probably in the future. So you have physical or digital asset. Now, to create an NFT, you need to choose the blockchain on which you want to create an NFT. So all NFTs are not the same. They are not, let's say, inherently interoperable or exchangeable, in the sense that there are different blockchains. You have the Ethereum blockchain, you have the Bitcoin blockchain, you have the Binance chain. So all these different, you have Cardano, another one. So you have all these different kinds of blockchains. And when you want to create an NFT, you need to choose on which blockchain you'll need to create the NFT. Because as I mentioned earlier, blockchains are not like interoperable right now. Okay, and you need to choose which blockchain you wish to deploy your NFT on. So and the next step would be to actually mint the NFT. So minting the NFT is where it becomes a bit technical in nature, because you need to set up a smart contract and which represents that specific asset. Now, smart contracts can be in different format depending on the blockchain that you're trying to use. The most common ones are set up on Ethereum, and the good thing is that Ethereum-based smart contracts for NFTs have a certain standard that you can follow. We'll get to that in the next, probably the next slide. But these smart contracts are very important and are critical, because if there are bugs in the smart contract, then this kinds of create these loopholes where NFTs can actually be stolen or transferred without the express authorization of the owner. So because when we talk about blockchain, we say that, okay, that element of trust now is thrust upon the blockchain system, but the blockchain system is just kind of a transparent system which just sits there, and it needs your input, it needs your rule to start working correctly. So, but if you code the rule in a wrong way, then it becomes problematic, because the blockchain just tries to execute whatever rule that you have set up. So if you do mistakes in setting up the rules, then it becomes problematic for that specific NFT. But in most cases, NFTs can be created without any of these concerns, because the current NFT smart contracts standards have been properly tested and have been used to mint probably hundreds, thousands of NFTs in the last few years. So the next step would be, okay, now that you have minted or created your smart contract to represent that asset, now you have a real NFT, which is the digital representation of that asset. Now you can actually transfer this to your wallet, and normally that's what you do. You create the NFT and it's transferred to your wallet, meaning that you are the current owner of that NFT. You could be the owner, or it could be the current owner could be a platform. So you have different ways of how this could work. And the next option would be actually to sell or auction the NFT. And this is what most NFT platforms actually do in the current market, and this is where it actually becomes interesting, because now you can create decentralized markets where you can actually list your NFT and people can actually buy directly from you, and these can and this new structure kinds of disrupts everything that we have been doing up till now. So a very common question that I usually have is, where do you store the NFTs? So in the case of a digital asset, you could actually store the NFT on the blockchain itself. So remember that we have the digital or the physical asset, and you have the NFT, that is the blockchain representation of that asset. So the NFT sits on the blockchain. The representation part of things sits on the blockchain, but the asset, depending on the nature of the asset, it could sit on the blockchain, but in most cases it's not on the blockchain. And the reason for this is quite simple, is that blockchains are very expensive. If you want to do a transfer, there's a fee to pay. If you want to store information in a blockchain, it can be really expensive. And if you have a high resolution 4K image of that an artist has created, then it's impossible to save that on a blockchain. It's quite impossible, because the costs of saving that on the blockchain would be huge, probably greater than the value of the asset itself. So this is why in certain cases, in most cases actually, the asset is stored in a certain kind of offline repository. So if you have a physical piece of art, a sculpture or anything like that, then the physical item needs to be stored on a physical location. Now if you have a digital asset, a digital picture or anything like that, a video, a GIF, or an audio, this also needs to be stored off the blockchain, so off chain. But the blockchain will always link to that specific asset. So what are the technical considerations when we are talking about NFTs? So earlier we talked about the different standards that are out there for NFTs, and one of the most popular standards is the ERC 721, which is actually a set of standards which dictate how to create NFTs, what are the functions that you can give to NFTs. And the good thing with that is that you can actually extend these standards. So you can set up different unique behavior if you want it. But most of the existing behavior which are needed for NFTs are already on these standards. And this would include like transfers from one person to another, delegating some control in terms of transfer and things like that. So these are already well documented in the ERC 721. And one of the most popular implementations of this standard is the Open Zeppelin library on Ethereum, and the same library has been used on different other blockchains also. But the Open Zeppelin is something that is very common. I think a lot of the existing NFTs use this library, and it's quite secure because it has been extensively tested and in real world scenarios. So these are like technical considerations when talking about NFTs. And if you're a developer, if you're a programmer, then do have a look at these standards. The base explanation is quite direct. The implementation could be a bit, the implementation details could be a bit tricky or a bit complex to understand at first. So what are some of the considerations when using NFT platforms, or if you want to set up your own NFT platform? So the first thing is about the cost of minting and transferring NFTs. So lately, Ethereum has been under a lot of criticism because of the cost of minting and creating NFTs. Because earlier I mentioned that NFTs need to be created on a blockchain, but if the cost of creating an NFT on a blockchain is higher than the value of the asset, then it kind of defeats the purpose. It makes the whole system quite unfeasible. So this is one of the main considerations, and this is why currently a lot of other kinds of blockchains like Horizon Africa blockchain is becoming a good option because the cost of creating, deploying, and transferring NFTs is relatively very, very low when you compare that to the current Ethereum ecosystem. So I would like to close this. We already and keep some time on the question section. So I would like to close this to say that we sometimes hear and talk a lot about blockchain and cryptocurrencies in terms of the financial, in the financial aspect of things, and yes, blockchain and cryptocurrencies can help you financially in terms of investments and things like that. But it's not only that. It's much more. And one of the like really interesting use cases of how we can actually use the blockchain technology to further what we are currently doing is with the use of NFTs by creating platforms which can allow artists, creators to actually properly value whatever they are doing and not be limited by a geographical constraint. Like, for example, if you're an artist, you only sell to Mauritians. If you're a Mauritian artist, you only sell to Mauritian. So blockchain technology does allow you to open up the borders, allow your work to be displayed and seen by people all around the world, and for them to properly value whatever you are doing. So this kinds of create a fair and level playing field for everyone. So you could be a very popular artist, you could be an upcoming artist, but you kind of have the same, now you have the same rules that you can use, and these rules apply for everyone. So of course, I start taking some questions. You can follow me on Facebook and YouTube, and if you have any questions, even after this session, feel free to send me the questions, and you can also contact me by email or on WhatsApp if you have any specific questions.
So yes, we have Pooja who has asked you, Bitcoin can be changed to Forex as well. How do you classify it?
So I'm just unsharing. Yes.
Chat channel.
Yeah, could you just repeat your question, Priya?
Pooja has asked about Bitcoin can be changed to Forex as well. How do you classify it?
How do you classify it? I mean, it's kind of let's say you have different ways of classifying it, and it depends on how you want to use Bitcoin. I mean, from my perspective, the way I see Bitcoin, I don't see it as for an exchange. I don't see it as simply a crypto or some as an investment tool. I don't see it that way. For me, Bitcoin is first and foremost a technology. It's the blockchain technology which is being used on a specific kind of industry, which is the financial industry, and working as a new form of money. Now, for different people, these may have different meaning, and it can be classified as Forex, it can be classified as an investment tool, but it really depends on what you really want to do with Bitcoin. So there is not a definite answer for that. How do I classify it? For me, it's a technology. How might other people classify it? It's an investment tool. For other people, it could be a life savings account. For example, instead of saving your money in a traditional bank account, you can actually save it in a Bitcoin holding. So all again, the classification will depend on how you actually use Bitcoin. I hope I answered the question. I can see other questions as well. Yes. Okay, let me just take the question. So, Nitish, how do you proceed to buy NFT or cryptocurrency? So buying cryptocurrencies or NFTs, right now there are primarily two ways to do that. The first way would be to buy from someone who actually owns NFTs or cryptocurrencies. So it's what we call a peer-to-peer transfer. You actually buy from that person, they transfer the cryptocurrency or the NFT, and you actually give them money. So that's what's called a peer-to-peer transfer. Or one of the most popular ones would be to go on a platform to actually buy NFTs. So or cryptocurrencies. Cryptocurrencies, you have a lot of platforms out there, Cryptofish, Binance, Kraken, where you can actually buy cryptocurrencies. It's not very straightforward. That needs to be very clear, because you need to provide your KYC details, including your passports and things like that. So it's not very straightforward. But this is usually one of the relatively easiest ways of buying cryptocurrencies. NFTs, on the other hand, have very specialized platforms like Loot NFT that I mentioned earlier. You have all the other platforms where you can actually buy NFTs, and these are like specialized platforms dedicated to NFTs. I think I have another question. So how can we know which cryptocurrency is safe to buy, if that can be known, of course? So what NFT, how can you know that it's safe? It's very difficult to know what NFT is, what cryptocurrency is safe to buy or not. And when I'm talking about cryptocurrency, I'm also referring to NFTs as well, because they are, let's say, up to some extent, the same class of assets, the same class of blockchain-based assets. So it's quite difficult to know. There are certain things that you need to verify. You need to read a lot about that specific cryptocurrency. For example, I'm sure that a lot of people are are marketing new cryptocurrencies out there. Like there has been a lot of hype about Dogecoin, and there has always been the hype about Bitcoin and Ethereum. But it really depends on what you want to do in terms of cryptocurrency. If it's about making money out of cryptocurrency, then it doesn't really matter which cryptocurrency to buy or sell. But if you really want to do something more than that, then it's important that you learn more about that specific cryptocurrency. For example, Bitcoin is very different from Ethereum, in the sense that Ethereum is what we call a utility token, because it's used to power the Ethereum blockchain. But Bitcoin in itself is also kind of a store of value. It's also a security mechanism. It's a bit more technical to explain that security mechanism, but you need to know asset in cryptocurrency, the importance of that cryptocurrency within its own ecosystem. Only then will you be able to properly determine which one is, in your case, the best one. Which platform do you suggest for buying cryptocurrency in Mauritius? So you could use Cryptofish, you could use I think Kraken, Binance, Coinbase, a lot of these platforms out there. Again, it's not very straightforward. The first time you need to submit probably a lot of documents. It does take some time, especially if you are a new buyer. It could take 30 minutes or a few hours, and you need to set up your own wallets and things. So there's a whole list of steps that you need to take to make sure that when you buy your cryptocurrencies, and you're at the stage that you have already bought your cryptocurrencies, how you store the cryptocurrencies. So you have mobile wallets, you have desktop wallets, you have paper wallets. So these are all the things that you need to take into consideration before actually thinking about buying cryptocurrencies. Only after these items are properly sorted out can you say, okay, now which platform can I use to actually buy cryptocurrencies? So I think I've checked most of the questions. So we'll just wait a bit if there are other questions as well.
Yes,
But
I can see some people typing. We can
yeah,
wait and
yeah,
see.
correct. So
Okay.
again, I
Yeah.
see that the focus is a lot on cryptocurrencies and how, which cryptocurrency to buy. But again, the importance of cryptocurrency is really it depends on what you want to do with cryptocurrencies, and there are a lot of people who see this as a way of making money, but you need to be very careful. It's always something very risky, so do your due diligence, do your research, ask around. We have different groups on LinkedIn and blockchains, where there are people who can actually help you to understand the differences between different blockchains and different cryptocurrencies and so on. So It's always very very important to understand what you're getting into. Help for first-time buyers. I don't personally provide. So the question is, do you provide training or help for first-time buyers? Look, I don't provide any specific training. It's just that you can go online. There are enough resources online. You can go on the Cryptofish blog to find the right resources to understand about the different aspects. They're not very complex. You do not need to be a geek to understand them, but you need to know about these different steps just to make sure that if you're buying and when you're buying, you're not losing your funds to maybe something simple that you have forgotten to do, like doing a backup or of your keys and things like that. So these are really basic things, but you need to know these different steps. So you could go online. I could share some let's say some resources on our blockchain, Facebook blockchain group and things like that that you can actually use. So yeah, we have comment. I'm already investing in under that cryptocurrency, but again, just be very careful on what you're investing in. Do your research, ask around. If there have been people who have been subject to scams, there have been plenty of scams in the past. I myself have been part of let's say a case where I kind of saw scams being operated here in Mauritius, with people losing a lot of money in these scams. So be very careful. So I worked with the FSC, for example, to help to stop this scam, which was successful. But again, these scams can be very sneaky in nature, so they operate under the radar, so it's very difficult to know about them. So just ask around, ask the maximum information that you can get out of these different cryptocurrencies, and really a very important rule, I would say, a rule of thumb would be that if someone is telling you that you're going to get 50% returns in your cryptocurrency investment, then you can already see that that's probably a scam or a Ponzi scheme or something. If it's too good to be true, then it's probably a scam. So requirements for data mining. I think that let's take another two questions quickly. Requirements for data mining. So what this would mean would be, I'm assuming that it's maybe crypto mining. So it depends on what cryptocurrency you are trying to mine. For example, Bitcoin, it's very expensive to mine. It requires a lot of hardware and a lot of electricity. Um, but other cryptocurrencies might be much easier to mine, but that doesn't mean that it's more profitable. It just means that it's easier to mine, and that's it. And the reason why, for example, Bitcoin is so hard to mine, it's so expensive to mine, because it acts as a security mechanism, meaning that you need to put a lot of resources in mining Bitcoin to be able to be part of the network. So that's generally how it works. So maybe we have 3 minutes left, so let's just wait for a few minutes. Okay, another question from Melvin. Your top 3 cryptocurrencies to invest. Again, I won't answer that. I can't answer that because to invest in, I'm not an investor. I'm not a trader. I work on the technology. I work on the blockchain technology. To tell you honestly, I've never invested in any of the cryptocurrencies. I'm not interested in investing. I'm more interested in the technology side of things, and this is where it's so groundbreaking. So it's a longer road, much longer road. It takes a few months, a few years to get there. but I think that it's worth learning about the technology instead of focusing on making money out of this. These two are not exclusive. You can do both without any issues, but learning about it is, in my opinion, much more important.
Okay, so we are heading towards the end of the session. What I can say from this session, young risk takers will know that NFT market is more efficient and more liquid than the traditional one. Some might say that it will be short-lived, but even if this is the case, this could represent a larger shift towards the digital economy, which is where we are heading right now. And ultimately, this technology is disruptive. And as we wrap up this session, I would like to thank you, Suyash, for all the insights that you provided today. I have myself learned a lot about NFTs today, and I'm sure that many of us did as well. Thank you so much. And I also take this opportunity to let you know that at Honoris, we aim to educate for impact. If ever you are interested in advancing your career, our faculty or staff is here to assist you over phone call or virtual meetings upon request to see where we can help. We will leave our contact details in the chat. And thank you everyone for joining us. Thank you again, Suyash, and enjoy the rest of your evening.
Thank you, Priya, and thank you everyone for being part of this seminar. And again, if you have any questions, please reach out to Priya. And Priya, if there are people asking for details and things like that, more information,
Yes,
please
definitely.
feel free to forward it to me.
Yeah. So everyone, if you want to give any feedback on this webinar, please feel free to reach out. We will leave our contact details in the chat. And if you want to reach out to Suyash, you can do so on his social pages, LinkedIn or Facebook, or even contact us. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.